Well, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Automotive Insight. Today we've got a 2014 Dodge Durango. This is a fancy one. It's the RT, so it's got the 345 horsepower Hyundai Ram engine in it, and it's all-wheel drive. The customer's concern is that basically the suspension just doesn't feel as good as it used to. It's got 145,000 miles on it, so they want to go ahead and put new struts all the way around it. So let's get to it. So to get started, we're going to be working on the fronts. Go ahead and pop your hood. These are the strut bolts. We'll go ahead and take them off. Ordinarily, the suspension will be able to keep it to where it doesn't just fall all the way down. But these are 13 mils. There's 3 per side. So the idea here is that we want to take off this bolt or this nut and get it separated from the upper control arm. And then we're going to probably try to take this sway bar link loose and then be able to kind of pull down on the lower control arm in order to be able to get this wishbone looking thing off. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is a 21. We'll go ahead and zip this off first. Now we'll work on getting this ball joint separated. You can just whack on this with a hammer if you want to. You can use a pickle fork, but the pickle fork usually tears up the rubber boot on the top of it. Or you can use this ball joint separator here. We have it, so we'll just use it. Now we're going to work on getting this sway bar link off. It is an 18 millimeter. Before we start prying down on this, right now we got just barely enough room here. We're going to take this bracket off here so that we can pull the ABS and the brake line back some when we start prying down on this. This is a 10 millimeter. Now we'll work on getting this strut bolt out. This side's a 24. The bolt side is a 21. So right now the key is in the accessory position. We've got the steering wheel turned all the way to the right. We got a pry bar pulling down on the control arm. You're actually going to take the strut and push it back up so that the strut bolts go back up into the holes that they're supposed to go to. But when you do that, you're able to pull back on the strut enough to be able to get it around the axle and pull it out. So as you can see now, we have the strut mounted into the vise. We've got our spring compressor on it. This is the one that you could see in our spring compressor showdown video. But anyway, it's going to use the strut bolt is a 19 from the factory. We're going to compress this down so that basically you just get a little bit of air gap between the spring and the strut top, and zip off the 19 millimeter, and the rest of it will come off. The struts are actually supposed to recoil back on their own, but you can see they're not doing anything. So obviously this guy needed some struts. As a point of reference, the new ones actually come strapped down, and so whenever you cut the strap, the recoil will go up on its own. That's actually what they're supposed to do when they're new. So we swapped over our bump stop, and we actually are using a new strut mount itself and a new cushion for it. So we'll get that lined up. And in typical aftermarket part fashion, the new nut is actually a 19 millimeter. So we'll get that snugged down. Now we'll go ahead and remove our spring compressor and get ready to put this thing back in the car. Do yourself a favor though, line up where the studs are on the top, because even though these don't turn like a bearing style, it's going to help you out in the long run if you kind of orient this thing the same way that it would be back on the car. Install is the exact opposite of removal, so just stick it up in the hole, work around the axle, and then just let it rest on top of the axle. Joe's down below. He's going to push the strut back up through the holes. I'm just going to go ahead and get these started finger tight. Back down below, we're going to go ahead and get this lower strut bolt put back in. Full disclosure, it takes a fair bit of finagling to get it to go back in. You have to kind of pull up on the lower control arm. For the time being, we are just going to leave this bolt or this nut just hand tight, because we're actually going to have to preload this thing before we get done with it. So after this, we'll go back up top and we'll hit the upper bolts. With a pry bar, go ahead and push down on the sway bar and you'll be able to get the sway bar link started back into the lower control arm. When we were taking this side off, we noticed that there was a lot of Loctite or thread locker all on the end of this thing, even though there was a nylock nut on it. So we took a butane torch and melted off what was on the bolt part of the upper ball joint. We didn't do it to the nut because it's a nylock nut, so you don't want that to melt off. The bottom of the ball joint has a 6mm Allen key that you can put in to help hold it. So pry down on your upper control arm, get it pushed down in through the knuckle there, get your bolt started. We're going to try to run this thing on as far as it'll go. Sometimes you can just force down.
Force that thing in there.
Enough pressure to be able to overcome, what's left of the Loctite. But if not, we'll have to use that 6mm as a holder. So we weren't able to get it on with an impact, so we're going to have to utilize that 6mm Allen and just a wrench. So we're going to spend 2 or 3 hours trying to get this thing tight. Now we'll go ahead and get our brake line and our ABS line put back up. Now it's time to make OSHA just cringe. We're going to preload this thing with it on the lift still. We've got a dead man underneath the lower ball joint, and we basically have it enough pressure on it so that the right front lift arm is just barely off of the car. That's going to simulate full load on this thing, and then we'll tighten down the lower bolt, because what will happen is if you don't preload this, you're going to end up putting undue wear and tear on this lower control arm bushing where it goes in. So if you tighten it down now and you put the weight on the car, it's going to be twisting that bushing around. So preloading it is a good idea. Well, we got this one knocked out. Full disclosure, the driver's side takes a lot more finagling to get it around the axle. It may be easier to actually just take that axle out before you get the strut out. But anyway, we were able to work around it. It's not that big a deal. Hopefully we earned a thumbs up from you. Let us know what you think down in the comment section. We have new content for you every single week, so consider subscribing to the channel. And with all that being said, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Idaho potato.